Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Mike Poteet, and you're listening to episode 81, reviewing Star Trek Discovery Season 5, Episode 7, Erigah, and Episode 8, Labyrinths. We'll start off with some Star Trek news and trivia.
Then we'll find out who wins Star Trek trivia right after our main topic, Erigah and Labyrinths. We're getting close to the end of Star Trek Discovery, and it's getting really exciting. Please join us, won't you? Oh my goodness. Mike, we finally made it. We're here again.
Yes, it's good to be virtually with you again. Yeah. And we're at episode 81. Now, I hope you and David in your last discussion mentioned that the podcast has passed Camus 2, just like the Enterprise D in the Next Generation's 80th episode.
In other words, we have had more episodes than the original series.
Absolutely.
Hoorah! That's awesome.
Yay us!
And, I don't think we did. I don't think we did mention that. So thank you for bringing that up. I would also like to say this is the first time you and I have been on the show, just the two of us, in a couple of years since.
Well, that's
before
true.
The break.
Since yeah. So it's good.
Yeah.
Good to be with you again, and
yes.
I've enjoyed listening to you and David hold down the fort and carry on with the mission. So,
yes. Well, and you joined us for an episode too. That was awesome.
Yeah, for when we kicked off this review of
the new
Discovery Season 5. Yeah.
Yep. So
it is
awesome.
hard to believe. You mentioned in the intro how it's not just the Season 5 coming to an end; it's Discovery coming to an end. I mean, it seems like it hasn't been around that long, really.
It hasn't been around that long. It's just 2017 was when it launched. You know, we're 5 seasons in, and we have shorter episode orders per season, and they've gotten shorter progressively as the series has gone on. So we've gone from 15 episodes in the first season to 10 episodes in the 5th season. And,
right.
It's taxing, but...
Although, as you pointed out, I think when you and David were discussing a few episodes back, that first season of Discovery, the episode length was quite variable. Like
it was
one that was only 25 minutes or something, as I recall.
Oh, was it that short?
I may be exaggerating a bit, but it was pretty short.
Yeah,
it was one that felt pretty short compared to some others.
And there were some longer ones too. Yeah.
And I wonder if I was wondering as I listened to you all talk about it, I wonder if, although the shorter seasons may be frustrating from one point of view, from another point of view, maybe they're able to make the seasons more consistent in terms of quality, which I think they have been since season 1. It's been a more consistent ride, and I wonder if knowing, okay, we've got 10 episodes, and I just wonder if that helps from a production standpoint. I don't know. But.
Yeah, and I mean, I've said it on the show before. That's something that I've wanted for Star Trek for a long time, because I felt like quality suffered because we were doing 26 episodes a season,
right?
And you had to stretch a much smaller budget, even than today's budget. Even in today's dollars, it was a smaller budget, you know. And of course at the time, even in TNG, for $1 million an episode was huge for a television series at the time. But it's also a lot of production. Whatever money you have, it's a lot of production. People working 18-hour days, for all these weeks. And every week you've got a show in pre-production, you've got a show in production, you've got a show in post-production, and it's just a ton of stuff to crank out in a relatively short period of time. Yeah. And so I've always said it would be better with a shorter episode order. I didn't really want it to be this short, but but I do appreciate the quality, and I do love Discovery. So,
it's been a good ride. I think the series is going to go out holding its head high. It's really taken some really big swings, and it's enriched the Star Trek mythos a lot, not just drawing back on the past, but taking us into the 32nd century and enlarging on the Star Trek future. I think that's quite the accomplishment. And I mean, it's interesting / frustrating sometimes to see self-professed Star Trek fans giving less than enthusiastic support to Discovery,
It
to put
is.
it politely. It's like, even if it's not your favorite Trek, it's not my favorite Trek, but even
Yeah.
if it's not, you don't have to be actively talking bad about it, and you should
Right.
be, I think, looking for what's good in it and saying, well, here's what I do like about it, and here's how it does fit into my Star Trek tastes or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of good stuff Discovery has done, and I think it's and maybe you all touched on this too. I can't recall, but I know others online have touched on this, that were it not for Discovery, we certainly wouldn't have Strange New Worlds, and we
Absolutely.
would, and if Discovery hadn't proven there was an audience in the streaming landscape for Star Trek, for new Star Trek, who knows? We might still be, however many years it is since Star Trek Beyond, and still wondering when there's going to be a new Star Trek coming down the pike. So,
Right. Well, and
it,
speaking of new Star Trek, we have news about those things that we could share with our audience if they have not yet
yeah,
heard.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Speaking of the 32nd century, it sounds like the upcoming Starfleet Academy series is
mhm.
going to be set in that time frame,
Yep.
and the franchise just announced that Holly Hunter is going to be cast as Captain and Chancellor of Starfleet Academy. I mean, that is
Nice.
that is a serious grade A star power
It
coming.
is.
And it's interesting. It's interesting. I saw a post on Facebook from John Ordover, former editor of the Star Trek books when the
Hmm.
company was still called Pocket Books.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, he was saying, not him, but he's heard some fans complaining about big names like Jason Isaacs, Michelle Yeoh, Holly Hunter coming to Star Trek, as though Star Trek is somehow beneath them, or if it's somehow just a publicity grab or something. But he
Yeah.
says, why aren't they considering the possibility that these big name stars are actually Star Trek fans who,
Right.
who would want to do Star Trek for reasons beyond a paycheck?
Right.
it's,
And
it's for a franchise that's been around 50 plus years. It's not hard to imagine many currently active big stars would at least like Star Trek and have seen it and be interested in doing a project for Star Trek.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've had big people before. We've had. I mean, even just. I mean, probably one of the biggest names we could claim was F. Murray Abraham coming in for
Well,
Insurrection.
yes,
But
yes.
you know, it's always been David Ogden Stiers and like really really
Mm,
respectable actors, really good actors coming in because we need good actors to do Star Trek.
that's
And
right.
and why not have good and great actors? Why not have Brock Peters come in?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
people who are established and known. Um, that's part of the appeal is seeing great actors doing great writing.
Right. Why
That's
would
part
you
of the
say,
experience.
"Oh no, I don't want the best cast available. Thank you
Right,
very
right.
much."
Like that's the other thing. It's like they're not just famous; they're also good at what they do. Hence the fame. So so yes, welcome to Star Trek, Holly
Yeah,
Hunter.
I
I'm
think
so
that's going
glad
to be
she's here.
cool to have the woman who voiced Elastigirl in The Incredibles, as
Yes,
well as many other things, of course.
yes,
But I think that's going to be cool to have her around on Star Trek. So I'm
yeah.
looking forward to Star Trek Starfleet Academy, that's supposedly going to go into production in late summer in
Hmm.
Toronto at Pinewood Studios. So
Yep. And I
here's
believe that
hoping.
same story mentioned that uh, uh, I keep wanting to call her by her character name. Mary Wiseman
Mm,
has not been forthcoming about whether she's going to be on the series or not. But I feel
you're
like it's
correct. It does say she's sidestepped questions regarding the
yeah.
show, but
But I feel like it's kind of a foregone conclusion. I mean, it
I hope
seems
she'll at
like
least show up from time to time.
yeah, it seems like Discovery's been setting that up
Yeah.
for this to be kind of a spinoff, and in some ways the episode where we saw her with her cadets last season, or episodes where we saw her with her cadets last season, was kind of a backdoor pilot for the Starfleet Academy series was my thinking. So I
Yeah,
kind
I
of feel
think
like she's going to
so.
be there,
And
but
didn't the first episode of this season have a subplot where Tilly was interacting with a male colleague at Starfleet Academy, and it seemed like maybe there
mm-hmm.
was some romantic interest there, as well
Yep,
as professional collegiality, and
yep.
I could see that thread being continued into the Academy series as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, and they keep calling back. She's worried about her cadets and all this kind of stuff, which I mean makes sense from a writing perspective, but it also makes sense if you're wanting viewers to be interested in this Starfleet Academy series you're about to produce. So
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see to what extent they uh, take into account the current still rebuilding state of the Federation.
Yeah.
Because a Starfleet Academy set like during the Kirk and Spock era or the TNG era, that would be very different, I would think, from we're an academy turning out officers for this organization that's still kind of rebuilding and still reestablishing itself and still rediscovering, no pun intended, what its principles are and what it's committed to, and
right.
So I think it'll be an interesting spin, and I assume the fact that Holly Hunter's rank, her character's rank as captain, means she's got a ship of some kind that she and the cadets may go off on various training missions or what have you. So
that's possible.
We won't just be stuck in. I was going to say San Francisco, but is the Academy still in San Francisco?
No, it's not. I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Where is it now?
I'm not sure, to be honest, because
they went back and saw that big tree that
but that was in season 3, and the Federation headquarters is off planet now.
Is the Academy at Federation headquarters?
I don't know. It's not, but I don't recall exactly where it is. Because I don't think we actually went there in season 4, but it was mentioned. But it's been a while. So anyway.
Okay. So you've got some news about future Star Trek projects too.
Well, yes. So from the movie end, you were talking about, we'd be waiting just for a movie. If we didn't have Discovery and all of that, we'd be waiting a long time because it's been since 2016, which was Star Trek Beyond. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen it or you didn't like it the first time you saw it, whatever, go and see it again. It is one of the best Star Trek movies ever made, in my opinion.
I agree completely.
I love Star Trek Beyond. I was so glad when I was writing the book, The Gospel According to Star Trek, The Original Crew, I was getting my manuscript in because we wanted to release during the 50th anniversary year. And I was so glad my editor not only gave me the opportunity to see Star Trek Beyond and write a chapter on it, but then to turn in an additional 2,000 words for that chapter because I just couldn't stop writing about it. It's the longest chapter in the book.
Is it really?
It is. Yeah. So it's not that. I mean, I have sections that are longer, but the chapter it's the longest.
Yeah,
chapter. It's certainly the longest chapter of all the movies and everything. So yeah, I love that film. But anyway, yeah, we have been stalled because there have been several different versions of new movies in the Kelvin Timeline series that have been proposed. But the Hollywood Reporter actually is reporting that, because that's what they do, that there is a new film. Yeah, there's a new film in development that is not in the Kelvin timeline necessarily, or at least does not include the Kelvin timeline crew we have known. And it's from Simon Kinberg, who was the X-Men producer. He produced a lot of the big X-Men movies. And he's also done some work he's directed episodes of Star Wars series like Andor. He's a legitimate, director, good person to potentially have on board. But this is being called a reboot. And it's also supposed to be closer to contemporary times and talk about the founding of the Federation, which, as David has pointed out previously when we've talked about things like this, the founding of the Federation has already been done.
Right.
And it's also supposed to talk about First Contact as well.
Yeah, a little movie called First Contact. Ever heard of it?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So
I stole that from one of my favorite podcasters, but I think it's a great bit. But yes, it is. It does seem odd that they would. Well, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you're right. It does seem odd. It seems like a weird place to go. It seems like, do we have to keep backward looking? And also, like, there are a couple things with this one. So, like, one is, this is not replacing what has been called Star Trek 4, the fourth Kelvin timeline movie. Right. Apparently, they're still trying to get a fourth Kelvin timeline movie made after all these years. And it's supposed to be the final adventure for the Kelvin timeline Kirk and crew.
Well,
given the
crew. Trouble they've had getting them together to do it, it would have to be.
Yeah, well, I think part of the reason they've been having trouble getting them together is that they've been, dragging their feet on it really, and starting and stopping projects. It was
Well, yeah,
just.
and so many of the cast have all been so wildly successful, and
Well, that's true too, but
so
that's one of the reasons they're, I think, hesitant to come back sometimes, and making pretty specific demands when they want to come back, is that they're kind of calling Paramount's bluff, because Doug Young and Simon Pegg were co-writing a fourth film, and I was really
right,
excited about that, because they wrote Beyond, and they did such a great job on it. And then that was canned, and then the Tarantino project, and that was canned, and then another Kelvin Timeline project, and that was canned, and so now here we are with this project, and not only does it feel like we're kind of retreading things we've already done, or at least revamping things we've already done, which doesn't feel very good at this point. But it's also set to come out in 2025, which is ridiculous.
that's that's not going to happen. I'm calling it right here. That's not going to happen. I mean, I'm not rooting for it to fail, but I don't see how they could pull it together that quickly and have a quality product, which I would assume they want to have a quality product. And yeah, I'm, as I started to say, it seems odd to me that they would choose this, and especially if it's going to be, I mean, I guess if it's a real reboot, and not the, I still think, very clever reboot slash reimagining that the Kelvin timeline is.
Yeah.
I guess they're not going to be bound to canon. If it's a true reboot, they can have the Federation founded at the end of the 21st century or something to make it closer to contemporary times. But and I will say, there are some precedents in the novels, at least, of telling the stories of the true stories you've never heard. Like, even before the movie First Contact came out, about a decade before, Margaret Wander Bonanno wrote this novel, Strangers from the Sky, which was the untold true story of human Vulcan first contact. And of course, what she said was the official story contradicted what the franchise said a decade later, but still, her premise in her own mind was the in-universe setting of the novel was Kirk and McCoy reading this novel about the true first contact of humans and Vulcans, and great novel. If anybody out there hasn't read it and is really into original series lore, I highly recommend it. Great novel. But so my point is, and on the screen they've done this some too, like the Enterprise episode Carbon Creek was the true story you'd never heard about when Vulcans first came to Earth. It wasn't right after. It wasn't the Zephram Cochrane incident. It was these Vulcans crashing in rural Pennsylvania, back in the 1950s and inventing Velcro. So so yeah, they could, if they wanted to, like, tell us these hidden stories around the edges. But I guess if it's a reboot, the idea is we're just gonna reboot, and that'll be interesting to see in my own mind and in the fandom how those two things are side by side. Like, well, which First Contact are you talking about? The Prime Timeline one or the 2025 movie one?
Right. That's the thing I appreciate about the Kelvin timeline is, like, we're, it is in a sense a reboot, but it's also, it's not telling the same stories over again.
That's right. It was a brilliant way to get basically a whole new blank slate, but still keep it all connected by that incursion of the Narada. So I'm not quite sure why they want to just.
I don't know.
It's like, give us a new ship and a new crew in the Kelvin timeline.
Right.
If you can't get the actors back, well, give us the adventures of the Constitution or the Lexington or something. In the Kelvin timeline.
Yeah, and you could do that, and then you can do anything else, but it just, the idea of rebooting an essentially rebooted franchise is just it doesn't sit well with me.
Yes,
and then the other side of it is, this is clearly based on what the studio wants, which is usually the origin of a lot of these things is, well, the studio wants this. Writers and directors and producers can bring ideas to studios and get greenlit, or the studio in a franchise like this can say, well, yes, we'll greenlight your idea, but change it in these ways. Or, hey, we want this to be the next direction for the franchise. That's the worst case scenario. When the suits are saying this is what we're going to do with the franchise, that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
The best case scenario is when you have a really smart, inspired writer and director or something like that bringing an idea to the studio and getting greenlit. That's the best scenario. And the best case scenario of that is usually that the studio keeps their fingers out of it as much as possible, which at this point is not something you can plan on with a major
Right.
franchise. Unfortunately, as we have seen play out over and over across various science fiction universes.
Yep.
But the other side of that is Paramount is on the verge of potentially being sold to Skydance, so who knows what's going to happen. That could wreck all the planned Star Trek film
Yes.
projects just
Yes.
in itself.
Yeah.
So now how CBS and Paramount Plus operate and the streaming side of Star Trek operates compared with the movie side, I don't understand all the inner machinations of that. But
Right.
I'm hoping that whatever happens corporately with Paramount is as has as little effect on plans for streaming as possible. So we'll see what happens.
It will be interesting, to say the least.
It will. It will. All right. So we have promised also some Star Trek trivia. So you are our trivia master.
All right.
Let's get into it.
All right. Here's the trivia.
Okay. I'm ready to type my answers.
Okay.
Okay. These are questions,
Although I'm
of
pretty.
course,
Let me
that we
grab a new card.
neither
I'm pretty
one
sure
of
we
us
have-
has seen these questions or these answers before.
That is
So
correct.
we
That is
don't
correct.
peek,
All right.
We don't cheat. Okay, go ahead.
No, indeed. Question number 1. In the Deep Space Nine episode Sons of Moog, who is the Klingon Rodek?
Oh,
Rodek.
Rodek. Okay.
Who is the Klingon Rodek?
I have an idea.
I have a guess, but I'm not sure. That's
Can
All
I
right,
can
you
I
ready for
put can I put like a double layer answer, because it could be that this person is both of these things, or it could be that it's one or the other.
Well, who am I gonna appeal to? The trivia police? I mean, you put down the answer you put down, and we'll sort it out at the end.
Let's see. I might be getting my. You know what? I think I might be getting my episodes mixed up if I give that answer. So I'm just gonna go with this one. All right, get ahead. I'm ready for
Number
the
2.
second one. All right.
How old does T'Pol reveal she is in the Star Trek Enterprise episode 0 Hour?
Oh dear.
That's probably.
I am taking what I would call a vaguely educated guess.
I'm trying to remember how old Sarek was in Journey to Babel and then extrapolate from that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to change my answer one more time, and then I'll be done before we
Okay.
move on.
Okay.
All right. Number 3, third final trivia question for today. Which actor from the original series went on to play Master of Disguise Paris for 2 years on the original Mission Impossible television series? That I'm fairly confident.
Yeah,
I know that one.
confident in that. I don't know Mission Impossible well. But
No, I've never seen an actual episode of Mission Impossible. But,
I do know its Star Trek connections pretty well, so I'm pretty confident in my answer.
all right.
Okay,
All right.
cool. All right, so now we will get to the answers at the end of the episode. And right now, speaking of episodes, we're going to talk about these most recent episodes for us, because we're a bit behind everyone else in the world, we know. But hey, if you're listening to this in the future, you don't care when this episode dropped.
And we're probably not behind almost everyone else. I mean, this is the streaming
true.
landscape.
It's the streaming world. Who
Some
knows?
people maybe waiting to watch season 5 till it's all done. So.
I know at least one person personally who is doing that. So
Oh,
yes.
okay. Well, there you go. So you see, we're ahead of the game in some cases.
Exactly. There you go. All right, so here we are, season 5, episode 7, Erigah. What did you think of this episode, Mike?
I liked this episode a lot. I think it
Mm-hmm.
may be my favorite episode of the season
Oh,
so far.
really? Wow.
Yeah, I found it, and mainly because last time I was on the podcast, I talked a lot about how I thought Maul and Locke were being set up as a, a parallel or mirror, not in the mirror universe sense, but
Mm-hmm.
a foils to Book and Burnham.
Right.
In terms of these are not just going to be our two villains; they're going to be our two antagonists who have real feelings and real character development and a real relationship,
Yes.
and that paid off really well in this episode. And I found, just to start with, what I found the most moving and powerful of the episode was Locke's death,
Mm-hmm.
and Book telling Maul to go back to be in sick bay with Locke as he died,
Yeah.
and Maul telling him as he's dying, no, our story doesn't end this way. I just
Right.
thought that was really beautifully done, beautifully played by both actors, wonderfully written.
Mm-hmm.
The emotion rang really true to me. I mean, being at somebody's deathbed is a very powerful and sacred sometimes experience.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I just felt that, and I felt like the Discovery crew had plenty of empathy and sympathy for what these two were going. Even though they're a thorn in the Discovery crew's side,
Mm-hmm.
they were not unsympathetic to them. They were,
Mm-hmm.
and, especially Culber, who, by the way, really knows how to rock a sea jacket. I don't know what that thing he's wearing when he's in the isolation bubble with Locke
Yes.
is exactly where it's so cold, but it looks really classy. I'd
Yeah.
like to look that good in it.
Yeah, I
It's
noticed.
something.
I noticed that. That's Discovery's version of the Picard away mission jacket.
Oh, is
it's
that what it is?
because it's
Okay.
cold in the sick bay. They've got the temperature lowered
Oh yeah,
for Locke, and so he's got this overcoat thing. It's really cool. I like it.
yeah, it looked really sharp. So
Yeah.
so hats off to the wardrobe department
Yeah.
there. But yeah, in all seriousness, I really found that whole subplot
Yes.
very moving, and
Yeah.
I think it makes it, for me, the high point of the season.
Well, and I love that part too. And it was, first of all, Eve Harlow's performance is so great. Not
Mhm.
just as Maul overall, but in that scene. And one of the things that Will Wheaton said in the Ready Room is that, I think Will said this, that he's like, I find myself rooting for these guys even though they're the villains.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
and Eve even said, but we're not villains, And it's like,
Right.
that's exactly what I've been saying, this whole time. Like, that's even how Eve, views their characters. And I love them both in these roles. I think they're perfect together.
Yeah.
Elias Tufexis actually was in the first season of Discovery, in one episode of the first season of Discovery.
Oh, really?
He had a small role, and
Was he under a bunch of prosthetics?
No,
or-
he wasn't. He was just his natural face. And boy, we talked about faces last episode, didn't we? And and he had said, if anything opens up that might be an opportunity for me, please let me know, because I would love
how
to come
cool.
back. Because he's a big Star Trek fan, and so they brought him back for this role, and it was just beautiful. It's just beautiful. I think he's done an amazing job in this role.
Yes.
And
yeah.
it's one of those things where, like, oh man, when she's saying, this isn't how our story ends. Whew. That was so big. That was so heavy, and that tells you so much about Maul's motivation, and really the whole conversation that they have, as Locke is trying to recover. That whole conversation about why they're doing what they're doing, and
Right.
all of that gives you so much insight into who these people are, and where they come from, and what they want, and why they want it. And you just feel for them. You just absolutely feel for them, because what other options did they have?
Right.
What else could they do? And they're, on the one hand, it's very understandable and relatable what they want, but the way they go after it is continually driven more by emotional decision making
Mm.
than it is by careful planning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's working against them. And it's what's
Hmm.
motivating them, right? Are those very strong emotional senses of self and senses of one another, and these very strong things that drive them, which are good things to have in life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But their emotional investment in those things, I think, sometimes overrides their ability to listen to ideas because they're so used to being isolated unto themselves. They've been so
Yeah,
isolated by their culture and by their circumstances,
that's right.
they don't know how to, they can't process. I mean, every time you see somebody trying to convince Maul or Locke that they need to do things differently, that they can get help, that Starfleet can help them,
Mm-hmm.
all of that, you see that cognitive dissonance going on, and they always just kind of fall back on what feels what feels best. You know, what they feel is most secure and what they feel they can trust the most, which has always just been only themselves.
Right, right. They really, like you said about the isolation,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. They have been isolated to such an extent that they only have each other.
Yeah.
And that's why Book telling her, look, I know what it's like to have my world end. Your world is ending right now in sickbay, and you need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think that's why it convinces her to go back. Um, but ultimately, so I was good. I guess my point is, as beautiful as their relationship is, and it's written and portrayed
Yeah.
so compellingly, the fact that it is just the two of them, there's no, healthy relationships can't just be about the people in the relationship.
Yeah.
They have to be. You can't have all your eggs in one relational basket.
Yes.
And I think Maul and Locke are in that situation where, and it's totally understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, because
It's
she's not Breen and he's the Breen scion, but
right.
on the outs with the faction in power, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, but it's just it's a tragedy that it's they're driven together by how they're isolated, and they do have a real love for each other, but
Mm-hmm.
that and I don't know how it's all going to play. I was I was struck by that scene at the end where Tarina is kind of leading the discussion / debate about whether to turn Maul over to the Breen or not, and just thinking there's really feeling what they were saying on the screen, that there's
Yeah.
no great answer here,
Right.
and and feeling just the weight of that.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Yeah.
it's
It's very difficult,
yeah.
and they're also in such a difficult situation because there's so many larger interests for them, right? So
Right.
they have all these larger interests that they can see. Maul and Locke can't see those at all. Really can't see them, and really don't care
Yeah.
about them.
No. No.
And that's one of the things too that, I mean, we can talk about whether a relationship like this is healthy under normal circumstances, right? Which it isn't. A relationship that is
Mm-hmm.
isolated unto itself, and where you're completely dependent on that other person for everything, is not healthy
Yeah.
under
That's
normal
right.
circumstances. But these people are forced into this situation in many ways. Yes, they chose one another, but they needed one another because they each needed out of where they were.
Right. And yeah. And to be clear, I don't dispute any
Oh
of
yeah,
that.
no, I know you
It's
don't. I
just
know you don't.
it's that's part of what makes it so darn tragic.
Exactly, exactly. So
Because our Starfleet characters are trying to reach out to them, and trying
mm-hmm.
to help and offer possibilities, and I think they would. I think
Yeah,
uh, but anyway,
they definitely
it's
would. And it's interesting. You mentioned the word tragedy, and I just started connecting dots in my head. Because I think tragedy, and I thought star-crossed lovers, and of course that made me think Romeo
uh-huh.
and Juliet, and then I
Yeah,
realized this is Romeo and Juliet,
it kind of is.
because Romeo and Juliet, their whole thing is, yeah, they're wanting to escape this circumstance that they're in, which is their families are at war,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they sort of fall in love with one another, or some would argue they just kind of become infatuated with one another, however you want to read the play, but they see in each other a way out of where they are, and they're
Ah,
desperate for that, and they need that. They
Yes.
need each other, but uh, they're also isolated, and they're also just young and stupid enough to not make good choices. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's what ends up their tragedy. And of course, I'm going to do spoilers for Romeo and Juliet if you haven't read it or seen it, but 600-year-old spoilers or whatever.
Put a spoiler warning on the episode description. That's all I
Right,
gotta say.
right. But in Romeo and Juliet, Romeo apparently dies. He doesn't have time to tell
Mm-hmm.
Juliet that it's not real, and he apparently dies. And Juliet, in grief, kills herself, which is the ultimate tragedy of their story.
Yeah.
Which is again that they're young and stupid,
Yeah.
because Romeo even took that that route, and Juliet, assumed the worst and decided there was nothing to live for. So we have a similar situation here where Romeo is dead,
Yeah.
but instead of killing herself, now Juliet is fighting to bring Romeo back.
Yeah.
That's the twist. That's where we've left Shakespeare behind a little bit, and now we're going to go off and see what happens with these star-crossed lovers in the future. And I thought Mull's arc in the next episode carries that farther, but we're not gonna go there right now. But it's fascinating to see where this is going, and I'm very hopeful for these kids. All the same, because Star
Well,
Trek
I'd like to feel hopeful for them. I
yeah
feel like it's going to end tragically.
it
Frankly, I mean, I know I said in our first episode this season that nobody dies, but I meant of the recurring
yeah
characters.
yeah
I think maybe both of these people may end up dead. I fear,
they
but I don't know.
might.
I don't wish it on them, but I don't know.
I don't either, but I mean, Star Trek as a franchise is not above bringing people back from the dead. But given the stakes right
What?
now, I know, right? But given the stakes right now with the progenitor tech, are they going to? I don't know. Like from a philosophical standpoint and a narrative standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what that entails, I don't know how Discovery as a series is going to choose to resolve that story. So
I don't know. If we're speculating, I would speculate that it wouldn't be Starfleet doing it. It would be Maul somehow getting her hands on the tech
sure.
and using it, and then we might have a monkey's paw kind of situation where it all goes terribly wrong. And but
Yeah.
that's I have no inside knowledge. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's gonna be.
I think that for all that Star Trek, of course, has brought back characters,
Yeah.
there's also a strong note in the series about life is ultimately finite, and that is part of what gives life value, that it doesn't last forever. So
Yeah.
so I could just as easily see, and I don't know what I'm something. It's ringing chimes of something else in Star Trek for me at the moment. I can't put my finger on it, but I could even see some big scene between Burnham and Maul, where maybe Maul is about to use the tech to bring Locke back, and they have to talk her down from not doing it because some other catastrophic thing would happen as a result. Whatever. If we use this technology, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Where else we've had exactly that.
I know what I'm thinking of.
Oh,
maybe I'm thinking maybe of The Bonding, the third season TNG episode,
yeah.
where the alien is offering Jeremy his mother, in air quotes that you can't see because this is an audio only podcast, his mother back, and Picard it goes to the lengths of bringing in Wesley to talk about grief with this kid, and I'm paraphrasing, and I haven't seen the episode in a long time now, but I think convincing Jeremy that you'll always have your memories of your mother, and they're beautiful, and you should cherish them, but accepting a substitute in her place is, undercuts that. And, it's as hard as it is, you'd rather have the memories of the real person than a lie.
A facsimile. Yeah.
Yeah. The other reason I really liked this episode was what they did with Raymer.
Yes.
Because at the start of the episode, he's, you can't trust a Breen. It kind of reminds me of Kirk in Star Trek 6, don't trust the Klingons. They're animals. Let them die,
Right.
So that whole thing's going on. And so I thought, okay, here we go. This is what I'm afraid of. All the character growth Raymer's made the last few episodes. We're back to him being a jerk, whatever. And Tarina calls him out on xenophobic comments, racist comments, But then Burnham takes the beat to talk to him in her quarters and say, what was that all about? And it made
Yeah.
me think of, I'm not a specialist in psychology or psychiatry or anything, but from some freelance work I've done, I know a little bit about trauma informed therapy,
Mm-hmm.
where the question is not what's wrong with you, but the
Right.
question you start with is what happened to you, and that's the
Yeah.
exact question Burnham asks Raymer, and we get to learn about the trauma of the Breen destroying his homeworld.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do we get to learn about it, and not only does Burnham, she says, "Yeah, you shouldn't have done that," but let's, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Why? It's not just slapping him down. Then, near the end of the episode, they at least try to turn that trauma to Starfleet's advantage. And I don't mean in a that sounds very crass as I say it, but what I mean is they leverage that. In the end of the episode, they use Raymer's knowledge of the Breen, gained at a very traumatic cost,
Mm-hmm.
to try to convince the Primarch to leave Maul with them.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was a wonderful study in acknowledging the way trauma shapes or misshapes, if you want to use that word, people's thinking and experiences and feelings. I shouldn't say how it shapes us. It does
It
shape
does.
us.
Yeah.
And then, so the question isn't does it shape or misshape? It's can we use it or not for positive ends? And the Breen don't leave, or rather they choose to give Maul to the Breen ultimately, but they accept Raymer's trauma as a kind of gift. And by that I don't mean that it was
Mm-hmm.
a good thing that his planet got destroyed. It's
Right.
not been a good thing that he's been angry and bitter about it all these years.
Right.
But there can be good brought out of it,
Yes.
And
that doesn't make the thing okay, because
Exactly.
nothing can make
Exactly.
the thing okay. But what I think what you point out here is really great, that it's going to shape us. The question is whether it's going to misshape us. That's really, really good.
Well, how are we
Because
going to let it shape us? Maybe is what I'm,
yeah,
how I'd want to say
because
it.
you're gonna
Yeah.
you're gonna go through what you're gonna go through, and you're gonna
Right.
have what feelings you have about it. The question is not what feelings you have, but what you do with the feelings you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's what determines the course of your life. That's what determines the development of your character.
Yeah.
And you do have the power. You really do. Whatever it is that has come against you, and whatever dark, lonely, awful places you have gone because of it, you don't have to let that thing continue to have that power over you. You can reclaim power over your own feelings, your own circumstances, your own traumas. You really can.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, I'm speaking to our listeners now, if you are in a position in your life where you feel that and you know that, where you feel that something in your life has beaten you down and you don't know how to get out of it, I can't recommend good therapy to you strongly enough. And finding therapy is hard sometimes because maybe you and the therapist don't click and you have to move on to another one. Don't get discouraged. Find help because it's out there. It is available to you, and you can do this. You really can. And that's, it's amazing how much, even though you never, it's like grief. You never are whole again in that sense. You're never without the mark of that grief. I recently met someone who reminded me strongly of a dear friend I lost, over a decade ago. And even though it's been over a decade, I still felt it. I still felt the loss of that person because, it was like seeing their face again all of a sudden. And it's still there and it's always going to be with you. But you can choose who you're going to become on the other side of it and how you're going to use the things that are part of you now, right, to either help or hurt both yourself and others. And there is a way forward. And I think that's how God works. I think that's how the Spirit of God works in our humanity. One of the ways. What I talk about on the show a lot, what we see in the universe is that the universe absorbs chaos into its matrix. Stuff, unplanned stuff, weird stuff, bad stuff happens, and the universe absorbs that and moves forward. And we have to do the same thing. I think that's one of those places where we can look to the design of this place in which we live as a message in how to survive it.
Mm.
A message
Yeah,
about
I
how to
wonder
survive it.
sometimes if when Scripture presents God's judgment as coming through catastrophic events
Mm-hmm.
like the text in many churches today was the call of Isaiah, which everybody likes the part up to verse 8 where the prophet says, "Here am I, send me." But then
Mm,
God says, "Okay, you want to go? Here's what you tell them." And it's a long message of judgment about how, the land is going to be left desolate and the soil unfruitful, and and in the end a holy seed will be left in the stump, the
mm,
remnant, and it's a prophecy of the righteous remnant.
yeah.
And I think I wonder sometimes if that's scripture. Yes, scripture directly attributes those things to God, but I wonder if maybe that's a way of getting to the same point of God bringing. I guess I would say I'm more comfortable saying God can bring good out of anything without causing all the bad things.
Right.
Uh, you know,
Well, and it's also, I
those
think,
those traumas can result in new life and new beginnings, not because they were traumatic and awful, and maybe not even because that's the only way God could figure out to bring about new life. That doesn't seem right to me. But
right.
but um but maybe that's Scripture's way of kind of getting at what we're saying here.
Right. Well, and I think about the remnant and the stump, and I think about it being less God saying, "You have done bad things, therefore I am going to punish you in this way," and more about, "You have done bad things, therefore this is going to be the result because this is how doing bad things works in the world."
Right, right,
And
and yeah,
even still, there is a remnant in the stump.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it won't all be over. So it's
right,
in a certain sense, it's less to my ear and to my mind, and probably maybe not to their minds at the time, but to
right.
our minds looking back on it, there's almost more of a warning and a message of hope than it is a message of judgment or a message of condemnation. I mean, it's definitely judgment,
I
right?
mean,
But
yeah,
not
this
not
particular
I guess
text, the hope
not
is very, very
retributive,
subtle,
right?
and
Not
only there in
not
the end.
not
But
retribution. I guess the point is not the retribution. The point is that there is still hope, even though all this stuff has gone this bad,
I
and
think
even
that's
though all
fair
these things
because
are, yeah,
yeah, I think that's fair because especially in this particular text, the things that uh, are going to lead to this disaster are social sins.
right.
The poor are not being cared for, and
Mm-hmm.
the orphans' rights are not being defended, and people are worshiping what they've made rather than God, and
Right.
so it's just this society, even though it's just gone through this long period of peace and prosperity. Under the king who just died, the prophet sees a different reality, sees
Yeah.
all the things the society's not taking a look at. And as we've seen in our own society here in the U.S. in recent years,
Mm-hmm.
if we don't look at the stuff that's wrong with us, it's going to come back to bite us.
That's right.
And we're still, anyway, I
Yeah.
could go on, but there's a reckoning. There's a reckoning,
Yeah.
and I could see Scripture uh, looking at our society and describing it in some very similar ways.
Absolutely.
And hopefully God would say, but still, uh, in your charred, burned out stump, there's a holy seed for the
Yes.
future.
Yes.
So,
And so I think that's kind of the call, is to be the seed, to be the remnant.
I
You
like
know what I
that.
mean?
Yeah.
And that's sort of like, when people ask Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" and Jesus tells the story of
Mm.
the Good Samaritan.
Mm-hmm.
And then his question at the end was, who is the neighbor to the man who was set upon by the
Right.
thieves?
Right. Right.
So his answer to the question is not, "Who is my neighbor?" He doesn't give them that. He's not like, "I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell you how to cheat. I'm not going
Yep.
to tell you like the minimum that's required. When I say love your neighbor and you say, 'Who is my neighbor?' I'm not going to tell
Right.
you, well, here's who you love. I'm going to
Right.
say, here's how you be a neighbor, because that's what loving your neighbor is.
Yeah.
Wherever you see someone else, you choose to
Right.
be a neighbor to them.
Yeah.
That's what it
Yeah.
means to love your neighbor." Right?
Yeah. New
So,
Testament scholar Amy Jo Levine says that that question, who is my neighbor is really a polite way of asking, who is it okay for me to hate? And no way is
Exactly.
Jesus going to answer that.
Exactly. And what Jesus says is no one. And not only that, but I'm going to use a person you hate, a Samaritan,
Right,
as
right,
the
right, right,
example of
right.
how to love,
Yeah, yeah,
just to bring the point home. Yeah, I
yeah.
love that. I love that. But I'll also say another thing that this reminds me of when we talk about judgment and we talk about, sin and all of these things that you've brought up beautifully in relationship to this episode.
Right. Not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Yeah. Hmm. Right. Right.
The whole of their morality is finding out what the list of rules is and following those rules to the letter. But I think what Jesus continually calls us to is not the letter of the law, but the spirit. And the idea that, okay, well, I've done this bad thing, therefore this bad thing needs to happen to me. This tit for tat idea, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, what have you, um, is something I think Jesus kind of pushes us past, and and we we have to, instead of saying you are guilty of this thing, you've done this bad thing, oh no, that's awful, we have to condemn you, or we have to fix you, or whatever, asking why this happened.
Hmm.
What is it in your story, what is it in your heart that is broken, and how can we mend it?
Yeah.
Binding up the brokenhearted, right?
Hmm.
Because the old saying goes, hurt people hurt people, right?
Hmm.
Because when we do things that we shouldn't, we generally do it because something is something has harmed us in some way, or someone has harmed us in some way, and we don't have a good response to that. We don't know what to do with our feelings, and so
Hmm.
we do something we shouldn't. And it's not about violating the rule or following the rule. The it's about the ultimate law of love, and
Hmm.
how do we respond to someone in love, and help them move past whatever it is that has caused them to do something that harms someone else. Because it's not just about, oh, these are the things God doesn't like me doing, and so these are the things God will get mad at me for, and so these are the things God will punish me for. It's
Yeah,
very
it's
much
absolutely not. And
right,
and 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 Jesus wasn't the first Jewish teacher to say the essence of the law is love.
right, right.
And I'm not saying you were saying this, but sometimes the law in the Old Testament is kind of mischaracterized as
Mm-hmm.
what you've described. List of do's and don'ts.
Right.
Those commandments, the Ten Commandments, are all laws that contribute to a healthy, flourishing
That's right.
society,
That's right.
right? And they are all ways of loving God and loving neighbor.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think yeah, finding out what's driving people to do what they do
Mm-hmm.
is important. I was
Mm-hmm.
struck by the line Burnham says to Rayner, "Thank you for talking."
Yes.
Thank you for being willing. Because he could have just said, "No, no, I can't talk." Maybe at first he even does. I can't talk about it. It's been a long time.
Yep.
But she presses gently, and that leads to forward momentum. So
Yes.
and to
Yes.
growth. So yeah.
Yeah. And just remember, and I think the takeaway from all of this is, you know, sin isn't about violating a rule. It's about violating a relationship. It's
Right.
about your
Right.
relationship. It can be about your relationship to yourself. You can sin against yourself, and that's not like, oh, there's a bad mark on you. It's something's broken in that relationship, or you have broken the relationship in some way, with another person, with society, with God, whatever it is, right? But it's
Yeah.
it's not just about God shaking a finger at you and
Yeah,
saying,
it's not,
you're
sin
bad.
is not just our individual misdeeds,
Mm-hmm.
and the times we've messed up that we can count. I mean, the Apostle Paul talks about sin as a power, that
Yeah.
just, for whatever reason, it just gets into everything and messes up everything, and is so close at hand all the time. And
Yeah.
who will rescue us from this body of death, wretched people
Right.
that we are? Thanks be to
Right.
God through our Lord Jesus Christ. So, yeah, we need that deliverance that we
Yeah.
can't always that we cannot
Mm-hmm.
ever fully provide ourselves. I think we can
Mm-hmm.
do an awful lot. That you've mentioned therapy, we've talked about relationships and society.
Mm-hmm.
There is an awful lot of good we can do and should do, but ultimately that power of sin is always there, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where we need to God to get us out, get us out.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's
um,
what we're constantly wanting from All in Locke. We can see them,
yeah, yeah,
caught
yeah,
up in their brokenness, caught up in the things that are holding them down, and we just need them to open up just a little bit so we can help.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So, have we covered that episode, do you think? Or do you have
Well, I
more?
was just gonna say, as a somebody who used to work in rare books, I was I was amused that Jet Reno turns out to be a former, well, not a former rare bookseller as the computer thought, but a smuggler who got some in-demand folios around to people who wanted them. Apparently, I'm not so sure I was sold on the idea of. Oh, there's a rare manuscript out there. Nobody knows where it is. Well, the former rare bookseller will know. Well, no, that how there's no. It seemed very Attack of the Clones from Star Wars to me, where everything you need to know is in the Jedi archive. So I guess we'll talk more about the archive with the next episode. But
Right, right.
but anyway, it was amusing to me that they've added this to her resume. As she said, well, I kind of padded my resume with that one.
I love that. Because of course
That's
she
not
did.
quite how rare book selling works, but she was a
Right.
smuggler. She wasn't really a rare book seller.
Right.
So
Yeah. I love that. But I love too that's kind of Jet's thing, that like she seems really casual about everything and like she kind of
uh,
doesn't care. But the fact of the matter is she learns things really deeply and she knows all kinds
yeah,
of
that
details and she carries them with her all the time. She just has this
right.
really casual relationship with them. And I love that about her, that she's like, well, I didn't really deal with that. Whatever, I mean, I guess I could tell you a few things and just kind of like, I don't know, casually unlock the clues for you, and you're welcome. Whatever. I got stuff to do.
It is, I guess, a valuable lesson in you never know what resources and wisdom you have right around you
Yeah,
until you ask.
that's right.
you know,
That's absolutely
you
right.
really got around. Oh, I don't mean that way. Oh yes, in
In
that
that
way.
way.
She's a great character. I enjoy her.
Oh gosh, I love Jet. Mm,
And one little question that's just been bugging me all season,
yeah.
and this is a good place to discuss it as any, and you can tell me what I've missed. Did we ever meet the original Cleveland Booker? I mean,
No.
one thing that hasn't quite worked for me this season,
Mm-hmm.
although he plays it well, is Book's feeling of, I got to look out for Maul because she's the closest thing to family I have.
Yeah.
Did we meet his mentor? I'd forgotten there ever was, quote, a real Cleveland Booker.
No.
Did I just miss something like
No.
in
We
season
we
three or
we
something?
never met him. We've only heard about him because
Okay.
when it goes back to really when Michael first met Book in season 3, and they were talking about, and he's referred to him several times throughout the past couple of seasons, the original Cleveland Booker, because he took his name
Okay.
in his honor,
Yeah.
and so that was his mentor and his really his father figure, and so in a sense there's a sibling bond between him and Maul, because she's Cleveland Booker's actual physical daughter,
Yeah.
and he is sort of Cleveland Booker's spiritual son or heir. Um,
Well, if
so
they say so. I mean, as
yeah,
I say, it hasn't really. I don't really feel it, but okay.
yeah, it's fine. That's okay. I understand. You know, but yeah, and that's the other thing about Book too, is that having lost his planet, and we'll get into more of this in the next episode of Discovery, but like having lost his planet, every little thing that he can hold on to for connection is incredibly precious to him.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that's another part of it. Like we may say, that sounds like a bit of a stretch, but it's kind of not, because it's like, if you've lost some person you love and you think there's nobody else left who was related to them or who loved
Yeah.
them, and then
Yeah.
you meet somebody who did know them or was related to them, then you
Mm-hmm.
go, oh, hi, we need to talk. You
Yeah.
immediately
Yeah.
have that bond with them. And I mean, that is literally the closest thing he has to actual family. I mean, I would argue Michael, but we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about that in the next episode too. But anyway, yeah. But I tell you what, we can talk about it in relationship to this episode, because he talks to Maul about Locke being her world.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about Maul and Locke as kind of a shadowy reflection of Michael and Book, that says something about the way Book feels about Michael.
Mm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that reveals to us more about their actual connection with one another and how deep it goes. And it's something that they're distant from at the moment, but it's still there, and we'll see images of that in Labyrinths. So.
And he said something about that not long ago, maybe to Culber when they were in the ship, or maybe to Stamets in this episode. I don't remember. He said something, I think, to that effect. Not too recent, or just very recently.
Okay,
Yeah.
I believe you. Well, shall we talk about Labyrinths?
Yes.
Okay. What thoughts did you have on this episode?
Well, I have a question for you
Okay.
regarding Labyrinth. Who is the most annoying librarian in Star Trek, and why is it Hyrel? I really intensely disliked this character. And I don't quite know. She just grates on me. I think she reminds me of Galinda from the musical Wicked. Before she becomes Glinda. She's just, I don't know. I just really,
You didn't like her.
she really grated on me every time she was on screen. Although I will say, in her defense, she's trying to give our crew important information as they're coming into the Badlands, and for some unfathomable reason, I don't quite know why. I guess they're feeling pressure to get to the technology, but they're not listening. And then when they have a problem, they're surprised. Well, you shouldn't be surprised because you weren't listening to Irel, who was trying to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Maybe she annoyed them the way she annoys me, but I don't know.
Well, she did. She did say. I mean, it was like, we have a little speech we like to give. It was not really their instructions for getting in.
But she was about to give them the instructions.
But I think ultimately
if they've taken the time to listen to the speech.
Yeah. I don't know if that was where the instructions were supposed to be, or if she sent them instructions to their computer. That was the message I got, was that, follow my instructions exactly, and they're like, okay. And I think she sent those instructions to their computer, because we never hear her verbally give them. And the part that they tell her to speed up on is the part where she's like giving them the history of the archive, which they really don't care about. It's kind of the introductory, this is our glossy, website copy of how great our facility is. I feel like that was the thing they were asking to skip.
But here's this thing that we've never heard of before in all of Star Trek, the Eternal Archive.
Right.
That supposedly has been around for I don't know how long.
A long time, yeah.
A long time. That's where, it's like the Library of Alexandria. It's all the repository of the universe's known knowledge. I just, wouldn't they be, granted, they're under the gun to get this thing, the MacGuffin this season. Well, maybe not just the MacGuffin, the progenitor technology. I won't be so dismissive of it. But I don't know. It seems to me Starfleet people being given to curiosity and learning new things and sense of wonder and all, they might want to hear a little bit of the speech.
Yeah,
I did.
I did too, but it's like, but they are really, and if you look at the way the episode ends, they didn't have any time to spare.
Granted.
That's really the reality of their situation, and the stakes are so incredibly high that curiosity has to take a backseat, I think. I understand why you find Hyrel grating. I think I really liked Hyrel. I thought she was hilarious because she's trying to be the flight attendant. She's trying to be the face of the organization and maintain this very calm demeanor, and everything. She's welcoming everyone to the hotel or the museum or whatever. And
Uh-huh.
but underneath it is all this other stuff. And she's just continually trying to play the role, and then it just sort of breaks as the episode goes on. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. I liked that. I felt for her trying to keep her stuff together, and everything around her just saying, "Nope, sorry, you don't get to." So,
I guess I can see her that way. I just,
but
yeah.
I can understand,
I
because
would rather have had Mr. Atos back from the library
I
on
thought of
Sarpade.
Mr. Atos. I did. Oh my gosh, I was just like, "Oh, it's Atos."
How many librarians we've got? Hyrel, Atos. There's a librarian in a deleted scene from Star Trek Nemesis on the Enterprise uh,
What?
E, I guess, at that point.
Oh yeah.
There's a librarian who's telling Riker and Troy to be quiet as
Right.
they're doing research.
Right.
But
Which.
but I can't think of any if there have been any other librarian characters or not. But.
Right. Right. Well, and it's yeah. I think Atos is really the big one.
It's nice to see libraries are still esteemed institutions
Mm-hmm.
in the Star Trek future, even though they have, computers and AI. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like a few episodes back when David Cronenberg's character had the actual legal pad from the
Yes.
21st century.
Yes.
I'm very resourceful. Yeah, but it's nice. And it's interesting that the Eternal Archive is set up like a regular old library
Yeah.
with floor to ceiling shelves of books and actually codices, not just ebooks or something.
Yeah. Well, and I want to point out too, from a production standpoint, that this is a real library in many
I
respects.
figured it had to be.
They digitally expanded it or whatever, but it's the Rare Book Library at the University of Toronto, which is
Nice.
the third most important historical library in the English-speaking world. And they have
Oh,
tons
what
of
makes it that? Do you know what
well,
they
they have
hold?
tons of like old manuscripts. I mean, illuminated manuscripts and stuff. If you watch the Ready Room for this episode, you'll see images of some of the stuff they have at this library. It's
I
incredible.
need to do that then, because I
Yeah.
no longer work in the field, but I'm still interested.
Yeah,
in
and
it, so
and
that-
David Ajala talked about him and Sonequa being, big Shakespeare nerds, and going and finding like original Shakespeare codices and stuff. And
that's cool.
yeah, it's really cool. So that's really great. And this is the first time any production has been allowed to shoot there, and so it's cool. I mean, not just in the sense of like from Star Trek 4 and Star Trek 2. Star Trek 2 is really where it started, where like they still read books in the 23rd century.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
carrying that forward even in the 32nd century and connecting it to a real world place is really cool for me. I really like that.
That is cool.
Yeah.
And actually, it's even earlier than Star Trek 2. It's Court Martial with Sam Cogley.
Oh, there
Books,
you go.
books, young man.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And then him giving through a real Shaw giving him the book at the end. And
Yeah. Yeah.
he says it's not a first edition, it's just a book, and that makes it special enough.
Mhm,
Which I've always enjoyed that moment as a bibliophile.
That's right. That's right. Very good. Way to school me on the original series as usual.
Oh, well, no, I'm not to school you. I'm just for, completionist's sake.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. It's wonderful. So what else did you enjoy about this episode or dislike about it or whatever?
Well, on the whole, I liked it. It felt a little slow to me. But whatever.
Yeah.
I liked the idea that this was a test of know thyself. Just speaking of Shakespeare, and I really was quite impressed with the speech Burnham delivers at the end.
Yes.
About how she realizes this is the point of the test. I think there's probably some degree of meta going on when she's talking about how frustrating and wearing down it can feel to always be having to prove that you deserve the uniform, deserve the rank.
Yep.
I think there's
I felt
some
that too.
toxic fandom going on around that issue in Discovery. Like, prove to me that you, this character, can be our starship captain, whatever. But I also thought it also reminded me a lot of the speech that America Ferrera gives in the Barbie movie. About how exhausting it is to be a woman, and you have to prove this and that and the other, and you have to balance all these obligations and responsibilities and perceptions. I wanted to get your opinion on is it or is it not problematic that that kind of the solution to the test is admitting a fear of failing, of not being enough, when, you know, again, I liked the sentiment, but is it somehow problematic that our first major black female starship captain in Star Trek is having to give this speech about, yes, I'm really afraid that I'm not good enough, that I'm going to fail, I'm going to let my man down. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I thought it was a good speech and it played well, but I wondered if maybe was it a little tone deaf to things or not, and am I just being overly sensitive? Uh, I don't
Well,
know. What's your read on that?
I think, first of all, we have to remember in a situation like this that Sonequa Martin Green is a producer on this series.
True.
And she's very deeply invested in this character. And so I don't think she's going to let things by that shouldn't go by.
That's a good
So
point.
we've got that to begin with. But then also, I think certainly we've seen various captains in Star Trek come to points of vulnerability before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important as part of the story of a captain. And I think the fact that Michael in particular, especially as captain of the Discovery, is so much as a symbol about black visibility and about the visibility of black women, that part of that is sharing the reality of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a big chunk of that experience is the types of struggles that
Sure.
Michael talks about in this
Sure.
episode. Interestingly, she has a different story as a character that leads her to say those things, because she
Mm-hmm.
has her past as a mutineer. Because
Yeah.
we're living in a time when your gender and your race don't count against you at all, ever.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And at least as a social value, right? Not that there can't be people who have those
You're
views, but
talking about in the Star Trek
in Star Trek,
reality.
right?
Yes. Yes. Uh huh.
As a
Yeah.
social value, we don't care about those
Right.
things. We want
Right.
you,
Right.
we want the
Right.
best people. So it's interesting that her character has been given another reason to say these things. And
Mm-hmm.
yet we listening to it can hear echoes of real things that Sonequa herself has had to go through, that certainly the ones we're aware of in Star Trek fandom, of proving herself, because even in Star Trek fandom, she still has to
Mm-hmm.
compete with the fact that she's a black woman.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, surely things to which we have not been privy in
Yeah.
her life and in her professional life.
Yeah.
So I think that from her perspective, the ability to express those things at
Mm-hmm.
this kind of level and on this kind of stage is an important part of visibility. Because visibility
Yeah.
isn't just about showing people, hey, we're just like you in all these other ways, or hey, we're good in all these ways, right? But also
Mm-hmm.
showing people your struggles, so that other people, especially people who are involved in constructing and perpetuating the systems that cause you to struggle,
Mm-hmm.
can understand the effect that their actions have on you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to see her nonetheless prevail.
Yes.
Nevertheless, she persisted, as we say, right?
Right. Right. Right.
To
Right.
see her
No, that's well
nonetheless press
said.
forward,
Yeah.
I think that's important and helps make Michael a stronger, more complicated character. And also, as we've done previously in this season when we're hopping through time, helps connect the narrative of the series from season 1 to season 5, which is important to do at the
Mm-hmm.
series culmination. So I can understand how we might have a moment of saying, is that problematic or not? And I appreciate your sensitivity to that. To my ear, it doesn't feel problematic. It feels important.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
thought. Yeah. I like that look at it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that was a great moment in the episode. I feel like it's sort of the moment the episode was building toward.
Oh, absolutely.
It reminded me, I had little glimmers of Picard's long monologue in Sarek. When he's experiencing all of
Mm.
Sarek's emotions and just going through those cycles, because she does go through so many like emotional gears in that. and is just talking her feelings out loud. And it
Yeah.
feels so natural, and it feels so real and so human. And part of that is the writing, which is gorgeous. And part of it is, of course, Sonequa's performance, which both lives up to and exceeds the writing, I think, and is just another reason she's such a valuable. You know, when Will Wheaton was talking to David Ajala for this episode, you know, he asked him about the experience of playing book and all of that, and David immediately shifted the conversation to Sonequa, and he was like, "Yeah, but it's all about playing against Sonequa." He's like, you cannot overestimate what she brings to this series and to my experience as an actor. Like, my performance is so much about responding to her, and like, just and I love that about his character too, you know, of instead of talking about his own process, directing the spotlight to his co-star. I thought that was very sweet too, but also very true and beautiful. But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, what other notes do you have?
Well, it reminded me in some regards of the Inner Light, in terms of, you know, the captain being out of commission, having this experience that's all in their head. You know, although of course it wasn't her living another life per se, but,
right.
But so I thought that was a nice maybe homage to the Inner Light. I also you talked about how they're working hard to provide connective tissue among the seasons now that things are coming to an end.
Yeah.
The Breen have really kind of become what the Klingons were in season 1, weren't they? With the way, you know, even down to the circumstances around Locke's funeral, where they're, you know, stomping their staves, and they're speaking in their own tongue that's being translated in the same font as the Klingon stuff was in season 1 that so many people were upset about. And there's warring factions, and talk about revenge for dishonor, and, you know, so it's interesting how I mean, I like that they've developed the Breen as a culture. I'm not sure so much what makes them special.
Right.
You know, what stands out for, you know, they still seem kind of most notable for the helmets and for the voice they're usually speaking in. Because they seem like another, like, kind of replicating the Klingons, but from a production standpoint, it was a nice kind of a bookending of things, because I think they were doing even some of the similar camera moves that were going around the assembly and so forth. This lieutenant who's guarding Maul for most of the episode.
Yes.
That's very curious. I don't think we've been introduced to that character previously.
I don't think so.
Maybe we had, but he seems very protective of Maul and very sympathetic to Maul. I'm wondering if somehow maybe this is just a Picard season 2 haunting me, but maybe I wonder if that helmet comes off, we find out it was Locke alive somehow and nobody knew.
I wondered that. Yeah.
Or some other character we've seen before somehow. I don't know if you have any speculations or guesses.
I wondered about that. His voice strikes me as different, though. I don't think it's.
Well, but all their voices are going through a process,
right?
So.
But I mean, just the base human voice that you can hear underneath it strikes me as a different person than Tufexis. I don't think it's him. But that is something I did think about. Like, this guy seems awfully friendly to her. But I think that's just because he, and he might be in those early scenes, when Maul and Locke were first meeting and stuff. He might be involved in that.
Oh,
and
maybe so.
There might be a reason for him to be sympathetic. If we were able to go back and do a closer watch, we might notice those threads. But I did really appreciate, the one thing I did appreciate narratively or thematically about the Breen in this episode was I felt like it was very much a timely commentary on fascism, which I think is one of the most important.
Yes,
I think it's one of the most important political narratives and social narratives for people to understand at this point in history, is what fascism looks like. Now, granted, this is a very militaristic, view of it. But I particularly think about the way it's embodied in the Primarch. If you look past the setting that obviously feels Nazi Germany, it feels, very, all that order and Cardassian, whatever. If you look beyond that and just look to the Primarch and look to the way he speaks and the way he talks about Breen culture and Breen history and Breen identity and all of that, right? And Breen superiority even.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, he's willing to break his sacred oath. He's willing to break Breen tradition, Breen law, whatever. It doesn't matter because it's all about power. That's said more than once in this episode. And it's particularly all about power for himself.
Yeah.
And you can see this playing out in the actions and the motives of more than one person.
That's right.
In the world right now. And and
that's an excellent insight. Yeah.
And so for me, it's really interesting to have that to see that dynamic playing, and that might have been a motivation for doing the Breen the way they did them, but also just exploring the Breen because nobody has. That's one of the things that Discovery does is like, well, nobody's looked at this from earlier Star Trek.
Right.
Let's dive into it and see what we can imagine it's like, which I really I enjoy that too. So and very much the way the Breen culture is rooted in identity and also conformity. And conformity to a particular identity. And even if, that solid face that you have is a type of solid face everyone else has, showing it is the crime.
Mm-hmm.
Admitting that part of yourself is what is the abomination. And that is so often what happens in this type of authoritarianism, which sadly we have seen reflected for many centuries in Christianity. Which is when you reveal the truth about who you are, what you struggle with, or what's different about you, even if it's nothing bad, just something that the powers that be don't like, or that someone has interpreted scripture to say is wrong, right? When you reveal those things about yourself, now you're the outcast, because we can't let that be admitted, not because you've done something so wrong, but because we're so afraid of admitting how not scary and how livable that thing that we're trying to ostracize people for is. So when you come forward and you say, no, I am this type of person and I'm fine and I'm okay and I'm one of you and I've been one of you all along and this is how your oppression has made me feel. We don't want that narrative when we're in a top-down mentality that's trying to control the way people live and express themselves. And that is where you see that division. That's where you see that othering. That's where you see people pushing people out. And in our country, and well, actually countries around the world, trying to use the law to help them do that. Trying to use political structures to help them do that. And that naturally leads to authoritarianism and fascism. And that's where I think this episode is really important in speaking that narrative, especially in the context of this particular Star Trek series.
Yeah, that's a great insight and great connections to make. I was in a conversation in a church just today with somebody who used the word abomination of another person, and talk about slapping a label on someone. You can't get much worse than abomination. How are you? So I'm not going to go into the gory details, but it's hard to have it. It's hard to have a conversation from that point when that's the opening gambit. It's an abomination. Well, what I said, I think I didn't say I think. I said I would disagree with you on that.
Right.
But it's really hard to go forward from there.
Yeah.
And you're talking about not just another person, but as Christians, you're talking about your brother or your sister or your sibling in Christ when you say this. I mean, I will say we managed to have a civil discussion and nobody raised their voice and whatnot, but it's really rough. Hard to go forward.
Well, because...
and I appreciate the fact that you're tying it to politics, as you say, not just here but elsewhere around the world. It's
Mm-hmm.
very disturbing that, and one of my mantras recently that I've adopted from the Psalms is "Put not your trust in princes," and by that I mean
Yes.
of any stripe, whether they agree with your politics or not,
Right.
because put not your trust in princes. There is no help in them. I mean, we just see time after time how our human structures are unable to rise up against these problems, and that's, I say that as though they, you know, in a sense, they are powers and principalities apart from us. But in another
Mm-hmm.
sense, of course, we feed them by what we do or don't do, right?
Right.
So it's a question of finding that balance of what can I do without expecting that what I'm going to do is going to make everything, going to save everybody,
Yeah.
save everything. God's job is to save, but how can we participate in
Yes.
that saving work? How can we use the gifts and talents and resources we've been given
Mm-hmm.
for positive redemptive ends? We can do that without saying we're the savior. We can
Right.
do that giving glory to God. In fact, I think that's one of the best ways we can is by, God doesn't want us to just sit around always singing hallelujah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember somebody saying, I think it's an old cliche, it probably wasn't new to them, but saying, you don't want to be a group of Christians so heavenly minded you're no earthly good.
Yeah. Johnny Cash has a song actually with that title.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I think it's
yeah.
someone else's song that he recorded, but yeah, no earthly good. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really true. And so there's two sides to that. One is saying, well, the earth is not my home. God will save us, whatever. And just saying, well, it's all going to burn anyway. I don't care, which is antithetical to our calling. And then it's, as you say, so it's trusting in God in a way that is not the way we're meant to trust in God, right? Because I think our trust in God is active because the
Yes.
Spirit
It's not
animates
supposed to be a
us.
passive trust.
Right, the Spirit animates us toward being co-creators with God, being co-writers with God of the narrative of human history, right? So that's so it's just saying, well, God's going to fix it and not doing anything. That's being so heavenly minded, no earthly good. The other way is being so earthly minded or so uh,
Well,
so
right.
like you say, not trusting in princes. So like I don't trust a particular president or a particular politician or whatever to fix everything, right?
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
especially in a democratic structure, I have a responsibility as a citizen to do everything I
Yes.
can to motivate the change I want, to be the change I want to see, as Gandhi said, to put out into the world with every faculty I have changes that will help us get we're never going to reach shalom on our own, but
Right.
we do have the power to help that shalom exist as closely as we can approximate it. And
Yes.
that's the thing. So if you just blindly vote for a particular politician or a particular party because that's how you've always voted or whatever, that's not civic participation. That's not
Uh-huh.
really doing your bit to cultivate a better society. You Because a person can turn on you, a party can
Yeah.
turn on you, and I think a lot of people in our country have found that in recent years, that they hadn't noticed or hadn't realized that the narrative that they had been believing all this time was actually a narrative that was leading somewhere they didn't want to go, and
Right.
they're now
Right.
struggling with feeling betrayed. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
well, you got to make a decision and stop having rules in your mind about who you vote for, and do the right thing instead. And so, using whatever political power you have, whatever communal power, social power you have, to make a difference, not just politically but also socially, and serving your community in any way that you can.
Yeah.
That's not trusting in princes. So you can use political
Yes.
tools,
That's yep.
but you're
Yep.
still not trusting in princes.
Yep. That's right.
If you take
That's right.
that
And you're
view.
not ultimately trusting in yourself either. I
Right.
mean, you're trusting God, but you're
Yes.
but you're you're not being passive, as you said. And I think
Exactly.
I've shared this on the podcast before, but it's been a while. Karl Barth was the major Reformed tradition theologian of the last century,
Mm-hmm.
and he wrote in a book he wrote about the theology of John Calvin. He said, last things we can't make happen on this earth, but might not little things and even great things
Mm.
happen? In other words, we leave the saving of all things up to God, but we do what we can, and we do sometimes even great things
Yeah.
uh, to anticipate. That's how I often think about it. Is as you often say on the podcast, God gets what God wants. So
Yes.
if we know that, if we know how the story ends, and we know what's coming, the new heaven and the new earth, why wouldn't we want to position the
Hmm.
current heaven and the current earth to receive that as much as we can?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a I grant it's a balance, but anyway,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you want to put yourself and your world in the way of the good that's to come?
Right. Yeah, there are different ways of looking at the kingdom of God. A lot of people say kingdom of God and they think of heaven. But kingdom of God really kind of means the reign of God, the rule of God.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Right.
and
Right.
and there's the idea that like we'll wait for the reign of God when it comes, when Jesus comes back. Or we'll make the reign of God happen here. But the truth is the kingdom of God is here now. And the rule and reign of God is here now. The question is what as human beings we're going to do to access and facilitate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that is our job on this planet. We are custodians.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are gardeners.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is,
That's right.
what are we going to cause to flourish?
Yes.
So,
well said.
There we go. What else about the episode?
Oh, other than that, just some picky little things. There are lots of puffs of open flame when the ship was going through the Badlands.
That always happens in
I don't know.
Discovery.
It seems like I don't know how Discovery holds together.
That always happens on Discovery, and I've always thought it was the funniest thing. It's just like we got hit with turbulence, so the flame jets went off. I guess as a warning light. I don't know because they always happen. It's
I don't know.
It's the equivalent.
It seemed
it's
like
the equivalent of panels exploding and wires falling from the ceiling in TNG. It's just.
I
It's the
guess,
thing
but it
that
seems
happens.
just like ratcheted up a next level. Like
It
open
seems a little
jets.
over
It's
the
like
top.
the throne room in the Emerald City and the Wizard of Oz. It's like I am Oz, the great and terrible. I am the Badlands, great and terrible. I don't know.
That is the truth. Yes.
I did like. I said I didn't like Hyrule much, and I stand by that.
That's fine.
But I did like. She said it's part of our sacred duty to ensure cultures that are lost are never forgotten.
Yes.
That word "sacred" caught my attention, surprisingly enough. It's not just a noble purpose or a good idea; it's a sacred duty, and of course, it makes me think about how many cultures either have been lost or are in peril of being lost in the real world today, and there is something sacred for those that haven't been lost. There's something sacred about working to preserve and to help rebuild as that we can.
Yes.
But there is something very important about remembering what has come before, and I liked the bit where I think you alluded to this book, being the last Quajon. They considered this object. I forget what it was now at the moment.
It was roots.
Oh, a cutting from the world root.
That's right.
From the world tree of Quajon. Yeah. That a holy stump, maybe.
Oh, nice.
I like that they said we consider this yours because this is your world. You're the last from this culture.
Dude, I've always said that Star Trek at its best makes me cry, and Discovery makes me cry more than any other series. It hasn't as much this season, but that moment, oh boy, did that get me. Oh my goodness, that was so huge for me because I've felt so strongly for Book ever since he lost his planet, and it's just I know how fundamentally it has changed him, and how much he's struggled with that. And I just want to just give him the biggest hug all the time. I'm just like, come here, buddy. But just that moment was so beautiful. And I think David played it just gorgeously, so authentically. And you talk about cultures being lost. Just a couple of episodes ago, we had Whistle Speak. And it was mentioned on the episode, and I don't remember. I guess it was David who said it.
Yeah,
I think
it was David.
Yeah. David said, that is a thing on Earth. We have cultures who speak through whistles.
Mm,
And that's
yes.
one of those things that is being lost. That's one of those
Mm-hmm.
things that's kind of a dying language. And so I think it's interesting that whistle speak episode occurred in this season, and it's kind of another thing about there's kind of a culture that's on the verge of dying, a people that's on the verge of dying,
Mm-hmm.
and by participating in that culture, by learning deeply about it and engaging deeply with it, then the Discovery crew is able to help rescue it in a way that doesn't break it,
Mm.
and that
Yeah.
that is really important. Because I think a lot of the things that we do sometimes as philanthropic efforts, if they're not thought through carefully, and if we don't do enough learning about the people we're trying to help, we can end up breaking something we were meaning to save.
Absolutely. And frankly, isn't that, I think, a nice evolution from where we were in the 60s with,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Captain Kirk every other week was breaking a culture to save it, right?
Right.
The
Right.
prime directive applies to growing cultures. These people aren't growing, they're
Right.
stagnating. And, okay, there's some truth in that sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of the Apple, where
Yeah.
he takes down Vol pretty good, but then leaves them to figure it out on their
Mm-hmm.
own,
Mm-hmm.
And yes, but I just think it's interesting that in the '60s, I think Starfleet is pretty clearly a stand-in for the United States of America, and the
Mm-hmm.
mission is to go around, yes, exploring strange new worlds, but also to bring the Starfleet way, the American way, to as many worlds as we can.
Mm-hmm.
But so now here we are, 5 decades plus later. Yeah, as you say, saving a culture without imposing our own on it, without breaking it.
Yeah. I think that's very
Yeah.
important. I think it was Mike Pillar who talked about the original series being going out and kind of teaching other worlds a better way.
Right.
And in Next Generation, we were going out and learning. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that was even a deeper reality in Deep Space Nine, where cultures
Yes.
are coming to us, and we're working with
Yes.
cultures and the resonant effect of our actions that stay throughout the series, which is something Star Trek had
Yes.
never had to deal with before. And then I think that's particularly also going on in Discovery, because again, I think this series continues to earn its title,
Hmm.
and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a beautiful thing, that they are
Mm-hmm.
always discovering, and that's what's so great about this being the final season, that every episode is about discovery. Every episode is
Mm-hmm.
about learning. It's about learning about a culture, learning about a people. It's about learning more about ourselves, and it's always it's this constant education. It's this constant discovery, constant learning, and
Yeah.
that's where we should be, because that's what advancement looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, hey, we've solved all our problems. Now we're going to teach you how to solve yours, because surely
Right.
the
Right.
things that
Right.
worked on our planet are going to work on your planet too. Well, yeah, maybe the same principles can apply, but not in the same way. It's not going to look the same. It's not going to sound the same. And going back to what we talked about in the previous episode, I went to the Dallas Holocaust Museum recently with my son
Mm.
and my wife and a group of kids, and we got to be a part of. I'm going to make this quick. Got to be a part of the a Shoah Foundation presentation that they have there. The Shoah Foundation was
Mm.
started by Steven Spielberg after doing Schindler's List,
Mm-hmm.
and they've recorded thousands and thousands of hours of survivors' stories.
Mm.
And what this is this interactive experience where the audience can stand up and ask questions to basically a holographic representation of
Oh,
one of
I've
these
heard about
survivors.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful. And they
Wow.
would ask
How
questions.
powerful.
And one of the questions asked was, are you afraid that something like the Holocaust will happen again? And what the
Mm.
survivor said was, it's not going to look the same.
Mm.
It won't happen in the same way. But we have to continue to work to make sure it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important about talking about the thread of fascism from the previous episode. That's really important as we look at our world, of learning from the past, and why it's important to hang on to those cultures, hang on to those stories, hang on to those
Mm-hmm.
histories, because that's how we deeply learn about what it means to be human. Because in Star
Right.
Trek, especially when we're going out and learning, like, it's not just about going out to other species on other planets sometime in the future. It's also about going to other human beings. I mean, it's essentially about going to other human beings and learning from them, and helping them and being neighbors to them. And it just, and that in the context of this episode and the saving of the world route and all of that, and connecting to our pasts, connecting to our cultures, and the sacredness of what it is for Book to be the final Quajon, the last Quajon that we know of, and to hold that in his hands, it's so precious. David talked in the Ready Room episode, and he called Star Trek an heirloom, which I thought was such a beautiful way to look at it. That you're a temporary custodian, in Chris Reeves's words, temporary custodian of something that belongs to something bigger than you. And that's part of sort of as long as people keep recognizing that in Star Trek, this will continue to be a sacred project, regardless of the corporate shenanigans that we talked about in the beginning of the episodes, right? And that's where I feel something so sacred in Star Trek, and one of the reasons the Gospel according to Star Trek still exists, is that they're just when we keep the focus on these things that are so important about what it means to be human, we necessarily bump up against the Gospel, because the Gospel is about what it means to be human, and I just feel like as long as Star Trek stays focused on that, whatever happens at the corporate level, the artists who are making it and who believe in it are going to keep making it a sacred heirloom that we pass on. So
nice.
That was a rambling thing, but
no, it was good. It was good. When you say the Gospel is about what it means to be human, I would just want to add maybe a little that it's about what it means to be human in relation to God, in terms of how God intended humanity to be, and how by grace in our better moments we are, that it's not just about humanity left on its own to its own devices.
Right, absolutely.
And I think that even though Star Trek positions a humanity that is more or less secular, more or less, fulfilling its potential, there is still there is still this aspect of we're living into who we were meant to be.
Yeah.
And especially with this season of Discovery, where there are constant references to spiritual matters and spiritual questions. So if you just allow me that friendly amendment.
Oh,
to your
yeah.
statement.
No, you're absolutely right. But I think the reason I talk about the Gospel as a human story is to say that obviously the Gospel has all these connotations that we're used to thinking about regarding God and regarding this, this greater dimension to our existence. And if we understand that that is a human story, that positions our humanity within that, within that narrative, within that story. And that if we think for a minute that our humanity can exist apart from that, we've lost the plot.
Yeah.
And that's why it's informative to me that sacred element, that soulishness to our being, that extra layer of importance to our existence, that greater level of reality to our existence, has always, always, always been a part of Star Trek.
Yeah,
from the
definitely.
cage, from Where No Man Has Gone before, especially on down, that has always been a part of us. When people show up with ESP abilities in Where No Man Has Gone before, we're like, oh yeah, of course, sure. Even though ESP itself has long since been debunked, the idea that there could be another functionality, another layer to our existence, and that could push us to something that has sort of this godlike status, and that it has to do with our relationship to whatever the divine is. That's always been a part of the Star Trek narrative, and I think it's really informative that something that is so deeply humanistic, and rightly so, and has a reputation for being scientific to the point of being scientistic, is actually also constantly interrogating questions about meaning, about purpose, about identity, about destiny, about calling. All of these things that are the sort of soft skills of the understanding of the human being, you know,
Uh-huh.
and that live in the realm of the humanities, that live in the realm of philosophy, that live in the realm of theology. We're always talking about those things, and I love that Discovery again is showing itself to be some of the most Star Trek that's ever been made by continuing to push
Well,
that conversation forward.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So yeah, I love this episode. I really enjoyed it. I mean, even though it kind of came down to, you know, a race for the MacGuffin as it were. I love that we go ahead and give that to the Breen at the end. I was like, you know,
Yes.
when the puzzle box beams in, you know, in front of the Primarch, I think, oh, okay, we gave him a fake one, right? We changed the data inside it so that they're going to the
Mm,
wrong place. You know, like, you know, their headpiece to the staff of Ra only had one side of instructions. It's like they're digging in the wrong place, right? No, we gave them exactly where we're
right.
going. We did
That's
what we said
right.
we were going to do. We stayed true to our character, even though the Primarch
Yes.
is willing to violate his sacred oath to get what he wants.
Yes.
We're
I
willing,
noted that
yeah,
too and liked it. I thought maybe the Breen fell a little too easily for the ruse of Discovery being destroyed, but okay.
yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true.
But I did like the fact that the Starfleet kept its word.
Yes, yes,
We're Starfleet and we don't lie. I mean, people make fun of that line from Wesley back in Justice
right,
all those years ago, but
right.
that ought to be the way it
It
is, right?
really is, and that's
That's
good, good.
No, I was just going to go off on Section
Okay.
31, but no, no,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
we're
but I mean,
Starfleet and we don't
we
lie. I
don't
mean,
lie.
it's good to have a representation of somebody sticking to their principles like that.
Right,
So,
absolutely, and you think about that. That's a very kind of juvenile description, right? And that's what a lot of us have growing up in Christian traditions of various kinds. Very
mm,
juvenile descriptions of what it means to be a Christian. Because in many ways, we often don't deepen our education about that past that level.
mm-hmm,
Um, Gene Roddenberry talks about, you know, growing up in the church and kind of not paying attention after he was about 14 years old, and that his
uh-huh.
thinking about religion sort of stultified at that point. Stultified was his word. It's just sort of stalled at that point. And I'm like, not unlike a lot of Western Christianity. Um,
Mm-hmm,
and the thing about it, and I'm such a big Fred Rogers fan, and the thing about watching that series is he's speaking to children, but he's
mm-hmm,
also deeply aware that their parents are watching.
yeah,
And if you listen, if you have ears to hear, there are things for you to hear as an adult
mm-hmm,
that come to you in that language that's built for a child, but nonetheless deepen who you are as a grown human being.
mm-hmm,
And I've heard it said about the gospel that it's simple enough for a 5-year-old to understand it, and complex enough that an old person will continue to study and plumb its
yeah,
depths.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and that's true of the deepest truths of what it means to be human, what it
mm-hmm,
means to connect with God. All of those things are very deep and rich and complex, and it's really good to have those sort of younger versions, those sort of idealistic versions of things to hold, and then
well,
to hold up. Are you okay?
fundamental in the
In the
non-fundamentalist sense, just
non-fundamentalist,
the
right, right.
core, the heart of it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's yeah,
Those core
yeah,
ideas, and then hold that up to all of the realities and all of the sort of dirt we've gathered as we've rolled along since then. Whatever it is, hold that up to it, and then say, how is this still true? Where is this
right,
still true? How do we make this still true in a way that
right,
encompasses all the other stuff that is still also true? That's maturing in faith, and that's
mm-hmm,
hard to
mm-hmm,
do when
yeah, mm-hmm,
the preachers are all speaking at a 5th grade level.
mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate people who are out there trying to deepen this conversation, and I hope Star Trek is giving us the opportunity to do that here. So with all of that, I am curious, and I'm sure our listeners are also curious about the answers to our Star Trek trivia questions, and which one of us is going to walk away with this episode's golden self-sealing stun bolts.
those precious stem bolts. All right, well, let's reveal our
Okay,
answers
let's
here.
take a look here. All right, sending my answers now. Oh, you did it in
Oh,
Discord.
okay. Let me put mine over there too.
For those of you listening.
Okay, so question one was in the episode from Deep Space Nine, Sons of Moog, who was the Klingon Rodek?
Hmm.
Kevin, you said he was the captain of the ship Kern serves on.
Okay.
I said he was a prosecuting attorney for the Empire. So we have two very different answers.
Yeah.
The answer is Worf's brother Kern after his memories are erased.
Oh, I was close to that.
That
but
was
yeah.
that was a good question.
That's a good question, because I was thinking that it might be because I was thinking if that is the person, the captain, I was like, is that the person whose house he becomes a member of? And then I was like questioning myself as to whether I was thinking of the right current episode and all of that, and I just kind of mixed up. But so I was a little closer on that side of it. But yeah, it's Kern. Wow.
That was a good one. I
Very
did not.
Good. That was a clever little
I
question.
haven't seen Sons of Moog in a long
I haven't
time.
either.
I think I've probably only seen it twice because I've only seen DS9 in its entirety twice.
Oh yeah.
So, all right,
Yep.
They got us both on that.
I was just
one.
talking about Tony Todd the other day, though.
Oh yeah?
Love him. Anyway.
How old does T'Pol reveal she is in the Star Trek Enterprise episode 0 Hour? You said 63.
Mm-hmm.
I said 98.
Yeah.
She is. Oh, you are very close. 65.
Oh, see, I thought it was in the 60s. Oh,
yeah, you
wow.
get. I think you get. I mean, of the two, certainly you were closer than I was. So nicely done.
Get a half point.
Nicely done.
You know, I got the first digit correct. I missed the second digit. Half point.
Well, and that half point is going to get you the stem bolt because I'm sure we both got this one right.
Probably.
Which actor from Star Trek went on to play Paris on Mission Impossible? Of course, that was DeForest. I mean, Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy.
Yes, it was Leonard.
I should watch some of those. I've never seen. I saw the first Tom Cruise movie, but that's all I've seen of that franchise.
Oh.
So I should go back and watch some of those episodes that Nimoy is in for sure.
Well, the first Tom Cruise movie is, to my mind, the weakest. The second is
That's what I've heard.
Is actually it's directed by John Woo, so it not incidentally is a gospel parallel in my opinion.
Oh wow!
Because I believe that was intentional on John Woo's part.
Now I'm extra intrigued.
Yeah. So, and the rest of the series, the third one and several others are really good. I haven't seen all of them, but but I had a friend who was really, really invested in Mission Impossible a few years back, and he was watching all of the series, the 60s series, the 80s series, all of the Tom Cruise things, and he was just like deep into it. So, yeah, there's definitely interesting stuff there, and of course Leonard Nimoy's on it. So hey,
I know. I mean, he can just do no wrong as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Although he did do that Ballad of Bilbo Baggins things, which is a little
that is awesome, and
a little
I will hear no other argument. That is awesome.
Oh, you're a fan of the Bilbo Baggins thing.
I am a fan. I love it. But yes,
So you win that match with 1.5 points.
I win half a point.
You've got the stem bolt this before the next go round.
Well, thank you.
Use
Thank
it
you very
well.
much.
Use it wisely.
I will put it.
Keep it secret. Keep it safe.
I will put it. I don't know if this is one golden self-sealing stem boat that we're passing around every episode, or if we have a shelf full of them in each of our houses.
Oh well, I kind of envisioned we were, taking temporary
custody. Okay, all right.
Of the heirloom that is the golden self-sealing stem bolt.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, I think we have discussed these episodes thoroughly. Let's talk about what is coming up next for us. So, Mike, what have we got coming up for next episode?
Next episode, we'll be discussing the final 2 episodes of Discovery Season 5 and the final 2 episodes of Discovery. Episode 9, Lagrange Point, and Episode 10, Life Itself.
Life Itself. Not the Roger Ebert documentary, the episode of Star Trek.
Right, apparently
there's
not.
There's a comma in the episode from Star Trek, so that's how we tell the difference. And also, we might be bringing you a special episode as well, so be on the lookout for that. So, we're excited about those things and hope you will join us for it. In the meantime, please like and subscribe, comment and share, and if you like what you're hearing, please write a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Your reviews help more people find out about the show and let us know how we're doing.
Also, send us your questions. You can find us at Gospel Trek Pod on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, and Mastodon on the 10forward.social server. and The Gospel According to Star Trek on Facebook. Or you can email us at gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to discuss your questions on the show.
You can also support the show by using the support button on Spotify or wherever you're listening. Just look in the episode description or the show notes, and you can find the link to become a subscriber there. We will be making cool stuff for our subscribers as soon as it's possible. For right now, we just thank you for keeping our warp engines humming. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time,
I'm Mike Poteet.
and I'm Kevin C. Neese. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. See you next time.